Li Keqiang, China's former premier, has suddenly died. Is COVID-19 back in China? Sure seems like it. And California Governor Gavin Newsom visits China to get China to take climate change seriously. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell, and this episode is sponsored by Keqiang. You probably know that companies are collecting your personal data, but you may not realize just how many. Dozens, maybe hundreds, most of which you've never heard of, and you have no idea what they're doing with it. Keqiang helps stop them. I'll explain more at the end. So, do you like beer? What about Chinese beer? Well, if you do, you may want to skip ahead. This worker was caught on camera peeing into a big container of malt used in Tsingtao beer. Tsingtao said it contacted the police and sealed off the container after the video went viral on social media. I hope that means that the malt in question is not going to be used. However, that didn't stop the consumer backlash, especially in South Korea. According to Korean media Donghang Daily, restaurants, especially Chinese restaurants in South Korea, are ditching the beer over what it's calling Peegate. Well, let's forget about Peegate, if possible, and talk instead about China's Leegate situation. China stripped its missing defense minister Li Shangfu of his government post this week. According to my favorite state-run media, the Global Times, Li was removed as a state councilor, which is like a cabinet position, as defense minister, and as a member of the Central Military Commission. Li was last seen in public 2 months ago, and so far there's been no official explanation as to what happened to him. When China's foreign ministry was asked to explain his disappearance, a spokeswoman told reporters that she was not aware of the situation. Really? Not aware of the situation? Now the Chinese government is just insulting our intelligence. Last month, Reuters reported that he was under investigation for corruption in procuring defense equipment, which was his job before becoming defense minister. The U.S. sanctioned him in 2018 for buying weapons from Russia, which, as you can imagine, China wasn't too happy about. The Chinese government has been trying to get the U.S. to lift the sanctions for years. But I guess in the end, disappearing Li was just easier. Li refused to pick up the phone for U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin when a Chinese spy balloon flew over the U.S. And he also refused to meet with him at a security forum earlier this year, except for this one awkward handshake. I don't think the U.S. will be mourning his loss. So far, there's been no announcement on his replacement, but I know someone who's out of a job and might be interested. Remember China's foreign minister Keqiang? Well, according to Global Times, he was stripped of his last remaining title as well this week. Even after he was removed as foreign minister in July, he was still listed as a state councilor. Now, apparently, Xi Jinping has stripped him of that title as well. And speaking of another one biting the dust, a former Bank of China boss was arrested on corruption charges. According to The Guardian, Liu Lienge was charged with accepting bribes and illegally granting loans amid the country's anti-corruption drive. Liu was kicked out of the Communist Party last week after he was also accused of bringing prohibited books into the country and accepting entertainment at private clubs and ski resorts. Was the problem that those weren't state-owned clubs and ski resorts? And really, speaking of another one biting the dust, former Chinese Premier Li Keqiang has died. Li was 68, which seems young for a CCP official. According to Chinese state-run media, he died on Friday of a sudden heart attack after all-out rescue efforts failed. They also said that Li would be remembered as an excellent CPC member, a time-tested and loyal communist soldier, and an outstanding proletarian revolutionist. That's because they couldn't say that Li would actually be remembered as the guy who admitted to U.S. officials back in 2007 that China's GDP numbers were fake, aka man-made and unreliable. And even more importantly, as the guy who people liked mostly because he wasn't Chinese leader Xi Jinping, which makes Li's death sensitive for the Chinese Communist Party, which explains why news of his death is literally shoved into a corner on Chinese state-run media, and why the CCP is trying to censor online mourning of Li's death. That's because people aren't so much mourning Li as they are making pointed jabs at Xi Jinping and China's growing economic problems under his rule. Posting pictures of Li Keqiang visiting flood victims, a way of pointing out that Xi Jinping doesn't do that. talking about how the GDP growth was much better when Li first became premier in 2013, a way of saying Xi Jinping has run China's economy into the ground. Yes, in China, talking about GDP growth is a way of sticking it to the man. In the past, the deaths of CCP officials has been used to display dissatisfaction with the current CCP leadership. That's how the Tiananmen Square protests started. Is the same thing going to happen with Li Keqiang's death? We'll have to wait and see. And after the break, there's a new disease spreading in China. What else is new? Welcome back to history repeating itself. COVID-19 might be spreading again in China. The Epoch Times is reporting that children with white lung symptoms are flooding Chinese hospitals, citing state media and Chinese social media. It says many children in mainland China are exhibiting high fevers, coughs, and even white lung symptoms. White lung refers to fluid buildup in infected lungs that makes them appear white on chest x-rays or CT scans. Healthy lungs look mostly black on the inside, while white lungs indicate infection. China's CDC says Beijing is seeing high numbers of cases of mycoplasma pneumonia, which some believe is a code word they're using to describe COVID-19 without admitting there's a new wave of COVID-19. When white lung started showing up last December, Chinese state media was quick to say that it wasn't the Delta COVID strain re-emerging. Instead, it said people were confused by what white lung meant, and that it wasn't as serious as people made it sound. That was shortly after China had declared an end to zero COVID, so China didn't want any reports suggesting COVID was on the loose, which is also why it failed to release cremation data during that time, despite a raging COVID outbreak. So I find the fact that the Chinese government is saying this isn't COVID about as reassuring as China saying it's got the cleanest drinking water in the world. Okay then, let's see Chinese health officials drink it. And speaking of China trying to cover up things, Finland is now blaming a Chinese ship for damaging a gas pipeline and a telecom cable in the Gulf of Finland. The gas pipeline between Finland and Estonia had to be shut down a couple of weeks ago because of damage caused by some external activity. At the time, Estonia's defense minister said the damage must have been caused by some force that was not created by a diver or a small underwater robot because the damage is more massive. He said they also had ruled out the use of explosives. Now, Finland has dredged up a large anchor near the site of the broken pipe, which is missing a prong. Finland suspects this is what broke the pipe, and that it belonged to the Chinese ship New Polar Bear, which is missing its front anchor. The other reason Finland believes this is because Chinese and Russian ships were in the vicinity at the time of the damage. I'm sure it was all just a coincidence, though. I mean, what are the odds that Russian and Chinese ships would happen to be so close to each other just as the damage happened? It's not like China and Russia are allies or anything. And after the break, can California's governor reset U.S.-China relations? Welcome back. I have some good news for all you cat lovers out there. China just avoided a literal catastrophe. 1,000 cats were rescued in China that were going to be slaughtered and sold as pork and mutton. Apparently, that's what cats taste like. Animal activists said they called police after they saw the cats being ferried to a slaughterhouse. It's still not clear if the cats were strays or pets. But after being rescued from the truck, state media said they were given to an animal shelter. We hope to live happily ever after. California Governor Gavin Newsom was in China this week to discuss climate change and improve trade ties. I say discuss climate change because, let's be real, not even Gavin Newsom thinks he can get China to make any real changes. Sure, there were some memorandum of understanding signed, but China only does that because it makes good PR and doesn't actually require them to do anything. During his week-long trip, Newsom met with all sorts of officials, from city officials all the way to the foreign minister and Xi Jinping himself. Now, Newsom's office said that he did bring up human rights abuses and things like China sending fentanyl precursors to the U.S. with lower-level Chinese officials. But during a meeting with Xi Jinping, he said it was all business. When asked if he should have raised human rights issues with Xi, Newsom said, "Look, I can't be everything to everybody, every moment of every minute of every day." That's true. But what he's also saying is that he's happy to glad hand with dictators who are committing genocide as long as they, pretend to care about the environment. China produces more greenhouse gas than all the developed countries combined. And it's not like it couldn't change that, it just doesn't want to. Now, one of the reasons Newsom said that he was there was to extend an olive branch. Based on his long-standing relationships in China, he fancies himself as something of a China whisperer who can smooth over bumps in the U.S.-China relationship. He said during one meeting, "I'm here in expectation, as you suggest, of turning the page, of renewing our friendship and re-engaging on foundational and fundamental issues that will determine our collective faith in the future." Which totally sounds like something the governor of a single state in the United States would say, and not, the president. I don't know about you, but I think Gavin Newsom is getting a bit big for his britches. Of course, that all sounds nice, but when you're talking about a country that would like nothing more than to wipe your country off the map, it's kind of hard to turn the page in the relationship. Newsom obviously ignored calls from Republicans in his home state to cancel the trip. Maybe because, as some suggest, Newsom is planning for a presidential run at some point, and he thinks this makes him look like a statesman. And it does. It makes him look like he thinks he's president already, which is not a good look. As for China's motivations, some speculate China wanted this visit to set the stage for a meeting between Xi and Biden in the U.S. Foreign Minister Wang Yi is supposed to visit the U.S. this week, and one of his agenda items is to lay the groundwork for their meeting, which could happen as early as next month. There's an APEC summit in San Francisco where Biden and Xi could easily meet. And this episode is sponsored by Incogni. Whenever you do anything online or use apps on your phone, there are a huge number of companies that collect your personal data. When I signed up for Incogni, I discovered there were dozens of data brokers that potentially had my private information without my permission. And these companies can get hacked, spreading my private information even more widely. For example, just this week, the company Okta, which provides single sign-on technology, said it was hacked, affecting 1Password and Cloudflare as well. So what can you do? Get as many companies as possible to delete your data off the internet. That's what Incogni does for you. Incogni has already gotten my details removed from 99 of these data brokers, with a lot more in progress. And I didn't have to do anything after signing up. Incogni just handles it. So I recommend you get Incogni for yourself. Click the link below or go to incogni.com/China Uncensored. The first 100 people to use the code Uncensored will get 60% off. Get your personal data off the market with Incogni. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.